We'll just dive right in because today is Colorado Goose Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
An important day for AINC, for nonprofits across the state.
Yeah, for everybody. It's a big deal. It's a big fundraiser, and we rely on a lot of different sources, but individual donors are a big piece of what makes us tick. And so we are Audio Information Network of Colorado. Primarily, we help to connect people with print disabilities, so people who cannot read because of visual impairment or because of other neurological issues, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, they can't hold print. We help to make sure that these people can be connected with news and information and stories and weather and grocery store ads and all of the like. And so we are out today reading stories, Christmas stories, for sort of a promotional event for Colorado Goose Day.
Yeah, so in appreciation for everyone who's been listening to Audio Information Network all year, for the volunteers who've been reading for us all year, and certainly for those of you who will be donating today, we just wanted to read some Christmas and holiday, not just Christmas, but holiday stories for you in appreciation of that, and to kind of kick off Colorado Goose Day.
And so everybody knows we have been in operation. We've been broadcasting for 30 years, and so our goal is $30,000 for this Colorado Goose Day to celebrate the 30 years of broadcasting that we have done. You can make a donation today at AINcolorado.org/30 years. So that is AINCcolorado.org/30 years. And your gift will help us continue all of the programming that we've already talked about. And for those of you interested in accessing our services, you can just visit our website at AINcolorado.org. Learn how you can volunteer, or you can listen, or you can connect somebody who would benefit from our services. And we do offer free listening devices. Right now we're offering free smart speakers to anybody who needs. So let's start in with the stories. Kim has a visit from St. Nicholas and a little bit of background about that and the story itself.
Yeah, I'm Kim Wardlow. I'm the executive director here at Audio Information Network, and we're going to kick things off with a poem called A Visit from St. Nicholas. It's one of the oldest and most popular Christmas poems ever, but more commonly referred to as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. It was written in the early 19th century, and its author has been disputed over the years. It's been attributed to both Clement Clark Moore and Henry Livingston Jr. over the years. But it was definitely published first on December 23rd, 1823 in the Troy Sentinel newspaper in upstate New York. So here we go. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And I in my kerchief and Papa in his cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. And way to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, threw open the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what, to my wondering eyes, should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they flew. They came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen. On Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As leaves that before a wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle and mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry, his droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the stump of a pipe and his beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of his pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his face like a wreath. He had a broad face, and a round little belly that shook when he laughed, like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head, I knew in a moment I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to work. He filled all the stockings, and then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
That was a lot of fun, Kim. I didn't know you had all that in you. So thanks to Kim, and our next guest will be Moses Street. So
Yes, I will go get Moses.
Yeah, very much appreciated. So we have, well, here he is. Boy, that was quick.
Waiting in the wings.
Yeah, and so just as a reminder to anybody who is listening, this is a celebration of our 30th year of broadcasting, and we are out today because of Colorado Gives Day, which is a huge event across the state where millions of dollars are donated to nonprofits, ourselves included. And we are working to raise $30,000 on Colorado Gives Day in celebration of our 30th year of live broadcasts, of offering news and information services to people who struggle to read on their own for one reason or another. And so, for example, donations would include $40, which would offer a smart speaker to one of our listeners. So people can register with our service, and then they are offered a smart speaker, which we help them set up, explain how to use, etc. And they can, with a voice command, say, please play the Denver Post, or their local paper, the Broomfield paper, or any of the regional news, or the grocery store ad, in order to help ends meet, because it is... it can be difficult. A lot of people are on fixed incomes. $100 would set up that listener. $250 would offer a more advanced device. So we're looking to move some of our listeners up from a simple smart speaker to a show, an Echo show, which could be used to connect listeners to their family. They could do video chats or chat with their doctor or a caregiver or just a friend who maybe lives down the hall, down the block, across the country. And $625 offers service basically for a listener for an entire year. And so if you are looking to donate, you can find us at aincolorado.org and /30 years. That's 30 years. And your gift will help us continue to offer those services. And Moses, what are you going to read for us today?
This is O. Henry. Whoops. I'm not used to that. This is there it is, a book by O. Henry. It's all his collected stories, and it'll be The Gift of the Magi, since it's Christmas. And this book is almost 100 years old, and my grandfather, who has always been my hero, gave it to me when I was in high school, and it was one of his favorite books. And as I'm getting ready to read, my grandfather used to love to tell emotional stories, and when he did, he would always break down crying. And I inherited that, so I apologize in advance. Okay, The Gift of the Magi. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, and sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home, a furnished flat at $8 a week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the outlook for the Mendency squad. His vocabulary is also beyond mine. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged. There we go, by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking, a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for her Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly. Her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall its full length. Now there were 2 possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs, in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the airshaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard for Themby. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining with like a cascade of brown water. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her, and then she did it up again, nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still a while. A tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket. On went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's presents. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meticulous ornamentation. As all good things should do, it was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it. And she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on the watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task. Dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, long and carefully and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flat, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22. And to be burdened with a family, he needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that he could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried. "Don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again, and you won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. You've cut off your hair," asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air of almost idiocy. "Gone, too? It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered," she went on with a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. His dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a little for a while." White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for so long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell, with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart was simply craved and yearned over them without least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned and coveted the adorned ornaments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom. And at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then, am I going to be able to finish this story? And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh." Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The full precious metal seemed to flash with the reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town for it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Dell, he said, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put on those chops. The Magi, as you know, were wise men. Wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who mostly unwisely sacrificed for each other. The greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are, wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi.
Yay.
And now you know why this book has been on my bedstand for 50 years.
Thanks, Moses. It's a wonderful reading. It's amazing.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Oh,
Boy, see why you keep him around.
I know.
He's such a sweetheart.
He gets me every
Yeah,
time.
it's a
But
wonderful reading.
I love that story. It's one of my favorite holiday stories, and it is about giving
Yeah,
and giving what you can, and
yeah.
sometimes even more than you can.
The self-sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was thinking I might have to help him out there for a second.
I was just like, where's the tissue?
I wasn't sure if he was
And
going
I
to
don't
make
think I was helping in the background.
Oh no, I
Ugh.
think he was focused in, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So I have to pick one of these stories yet to read, I suppose. We have Velveteen Rabbit here, which is pretty long, but and then there's the Polar Express, which I don't really know. So, what do you think?
I think the Polar Express would be fun.
Okay,
After that one, we need a little.
a little levity. I'll try to get through the Polar Express. I don't know. There's a bunch of narrators. We'll make it work as well as we can, but we'll take a quick stop to just to say again that this is a celebration of us just being in continuous operation, offering broadcasts for people who can't read on their own. There's some barrier to them being able to read, and we, for 30 years, have broadcast over the air, over the internet, sometimes over thumb drives, sometimes over little devices that we mail out.
Absolutely.
We have helped offer local news, information, grocery store ads, just all kinds of things. And now we're looking toward the future to offer even more mental health support for people who are losing their vision, because it's a struggle.
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah, and I've been a listener. I am one of those people that benefit from this incredible organization. So it's really cool to be here on staff. But it really does connect you to the community. We are the absolute only resource in Colorado that offers these services, and
live human voices
just like ours.
Yep.
And
so we have a team of about 150 active volunteers who used to come into studios like these but now record from home. All of the stuff that we send out is live human voice, not all of it recorded by us, but 150 people with a larger stream. Thank you. We got some options here. Thank you,
you can
Rosanna.
come in and say hi, Rosanna. Come in. You can come in and say hi. Rosanna, this is Rosanna. Rosanna is incredible. She's the one. She brought in her little elf shirt for me to wear. She decorated the studio. Rosanna's is a huge support here at AINC.
Yeah,
She's a gift to us.
Hi,
she
guys.
is. Yeah, so thank you, Rosanna. I've
Thank
got
you.
some text here that I can read stories now. This will be a better format than what I have on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Rosanna.
So if you would like to help us keep on doing what we've been doing and help us work toward the future where we offer more comprehensive, more interesting, more informative, more supportive services. You can find us at AINColorado. .org/30 years, so that is 30 years, or we're at the Colorado Gives Day website. And if you're looking to connect somebody with our services, we are just at AINColorado.org, so you can go there and help somebody register if they get a free listening device, smart speaker.
Yeah, and I want to just give a shout out to everybody who's already given. We've gotten some really incredible gifts already today. But please help us reach that goal of 30,000 today to celebrate the 30 years that we've been here.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
So we have an edition of Polar Express, which I will read. And there's a bunch of photos here. I don't know that we're going to be able to do all of them, but it looks like it's from the movie. So we'll dive into the Polar Express, which Rosanna was kind enough to bring me. And I don't have to figure out who the narrators are at this point, because I think it's just in straight prose. So we'll see if I can make sure that I am in frame. I think I'm in frame. So we've got the Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allensburg. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear. The ringing of bells of Santa's sleigh. There's no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window, and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and as fresh as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of town and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor. "There is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas, every toy was made. At first we saw no elves. "They are gathering in the center of the city," said the conductor. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "The elves!" Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets of Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped, and the conductor let us out. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large, open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and they paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and pointing to me, he said, "Let's have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh and the conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine. But the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything else was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas!" A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed me the bell, and I put it into my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out to the reindeer all their names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward, and he climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark, polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa's sleigh. "Let's hurry inside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and I waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it, and inside was the silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket." Signed, Mr. C. I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," my father said, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell. But as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, as it does for all who truly believe.
I love that story.
I never read that one before.
When our girls were little, we had a tradition which I think they kept carried on to their kids, but like there was the presents from grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, things like that, and then there was always a gift under the tree that had super unique wrapping, out of this world wrapping, that was really special, and inside was the
bell.
The bell, yeah. It was fun. I miss the kids when they were little. It's
Yeah.
so magical. But yeah, and that story was recommended this morning from one of our employees here
Yeah.
at AINC, Evan, which I'll have him pop in here in a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully, Evan, you enjoyed that. I had never heard that
Yeah,
one.
that was
fun.
for you, Evan. So
And the stories, of course, are for us as an organization, and that's what the live stream's all about. Just one more time, we'll mention that we're doing this because we've been in operation for 30 years. So we're celebrating our 30th anniversary of live broadcasting. And we're doing Colorado Gives Day today, which is a huge event that is a fundraiser for all nonprofits across the state of Colorado. And it's filled with exemplary generosity by the entire state. Millions and millions of dollars pour out from generous donors. And we are working to raise $30,000 this year. We've gotten some generous donors. We'll see how the day goes.
Yep.
And we're asking that if you think that we have a good service, that you chip in so that we can continue to offer everything that we've done in the past and to work to offer even more in the future. So we'll leave it at that.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we go to our next story?
Yeah. So what we have now is a story by I don't know who actually.
Lorna Green.
Well, Lorna Green, but I was trying to think
who
of
wrote it.
Who wrote the actual story?
It's anonymous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we have a story that has been read by Lorna Green, who is a storyteller. And we're trying to get our software to cooperate.
Yeah,
here.
and she's one of our listeners, and Lorna, I don't think she'll yell at me for telling us she's 85 years old. She's Jewish, and she's a storyteller, and she tells this story. She recites this story to different groups, including senior citizens. She goes to senior centers to read it to them or recite it to them, and then she also visits even preschools. So it's for all ages. And
it was fun, and she's quite animated, so I'm excited to share this with us. So if everything's working correctly, we should have Lorna reciting this from memory.
Yeah.
I belong to a group called St. Vrain Valley Storytellers, and we are a group of people whose mission is not to bring back, but to make sure it stays, and that's the art of storytelling. When I first became a storyteller was also when I first started having vision problems. And frequently it was very difficult for me to read to the kids, which I love to do. But not having to worry about reading it from a book, but being able to tell them a story was it was the most wonderful thing that could have happened to me, because it meant I could keep on doing what I was doing, but do it in a very different way. So that's why I became a storyteller rather than just a story reader. And I urge all of you, doesn't matter whether you think you're good at storytelling or not, tell stories to your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, whatever. So that's why I became a way of passing on the stories, but also of sharing yourself with the children that you're telling. I urge all of you, it really doesn't matter whether you think you're good at storytelling. The name of the story is Mr. Mortison to your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, whatever. And I think so that's why I have a way of passing on the story, even though, of course, it is a holiday story, but it can be used for almost any holiday. And Mr. Mortison is an alien. And there aren't too many holiday stories that have an alien as the main character. So if you'll just sit back for a minute, I will tell you what happened on Mr. Mortison's very, very hard day. Mr. Mortison was very, very good at what he did. He was one of the best of his kind. He had a very important job on his planet. He traveled a lot to other planets. The reason he traveled so much was to find out what they were doing and to find out if they were doing it the right way. The planet that Mr. Mortison lived on was a planet that was dedicated to peace. They felt that peace should have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 pages in the dictionary. War should only have a half a line. They really believed in peace. And so Mr. Mortison's job was to go from one planet to another when there was any hint of something going wrong, and find out whether or not that planet was still peaceful enough to be a place for people to live. If it wasn't, by the way, then he would just do away with them, with everything that was living on the planet. It wasn't like a war. All he had to do was to sneeze. And if he sneezed while he was at work, while he was checking out a planet to find out whether or not the people were peaceful, and he decided they weren't, and he sneezed, they were gone. That was the end of it. They just weren't there anymore. Well, on this particular day, Mr. Mortison's boss told him that he was going to visit a planet he hadn't been to before. It was called Earth. He'd gotten a lot of very negative stories about Earth. It was time for Mr. Mortison to go and find out what was really going on. I would tell you that Mr. Mortison put on a uniform, brushed his hair, shaved, wanted to look great, but that's not really how it works. On his planet, you don't put on anything because you don't really have a body to put it on. You're just there. Of course, when he got to Earth, he would have a body. He would look like all the other people who lived on Earth. But until then, he was just Mr. Mortison. Everybody knew he was there. They could kind of feel him being around, but you couldn't see him. Well, it was time for him to go, so he took a deep breath. And there he was on Earth. He looked around. He was in a car, they called it. I guess that's the way most people get around here, he thought. Not bad car. Actually, it was a classic car. It was a 1980 Cadillac. It was gorgeous. He didn't know that, of course. It didn't matter to him. But he'd find out later what some people thought about it. Okay, well, here he was. I guess it's time to start. So, turned the key, started the car, and started to pull away from the sidewalk where he was parked, when all of a sudden there was a screaming horn. "What are you doing, old man?" Somebody was yelling at him. "Why don't you look where you're going, old fella?" Mr. Mortison was more than a little taken aback. What kind of a way was that to talk to someone? Didn't sound like things were going to get any better. He might just have to get rid of these people quicker than you could bat your eye. No, take a deep breath. Wait a minute. Let them go. We'll give them another chance. The other car pulled around Mr. Mortison and screamed down the street. Very carefully, Mr. Mortison put the car in gear, turned the wheel, pulled out from his parking place, and started down the street. He looked around. Things were pretty crowded. There were all sorts of people around, people running across the street without really looking. My goodness, he nearly hit that person. They didn't even stop for the red light. That's terrible. Oh, all right, let's try again. Mr. Mortison put the car in first gear, then about into second and third, driving down the road. Oh, look at all those people over there. I think that's a shopping center, he thought. I've heard that shopping centers have a lot of people doing fun things. Let's go in there. He was talking to himself, but he was used to that because usually when he went on a job, he didn't have anybody else to talk to. So he pulled into the parking lot, and just as he was about to pull into a parking place, somebody else's brakes screeched. Somebody else leaned out of their window and yelled, "Where do you think you're going? That's my space." Mr. Mortison really didn't have anything to say to someone who was talking like that. So very, very carefully, but very quietly, he just pulled into the parking place. And mentally, he put that one in his mind too. Those are two people who've screamed at me so far, and I haven't even gotten out of the car yet to find out what these people are like. He parked the car and got out, locked the door, and started to walk across the parking lot towards one of the stores. "Hey, mister, move along. I got stuff here I got to put in my car." My goodness, people spoke so loudly here. He didn't know what to do about that. He sort of shook his head and walked a little bit faster, not very fast, but a little bit faster. He looked at all the people who were walking around, and there were some of them who had smiles on their faces. There were an awful lot of them who didn't. And there was pushing and shoving. My goodness, that didn't make him very comfortable. He walked into the store, and there were people standing in line with baskets full of things. They weren't standing in line very quietly, though. They were yelling at each other. Move along. I got to get home. My kids need lunch. Blah, 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 blah." Mr. Mortison's nose started to itch. Was he going to have to sneeze? Was it time that he should sneeze? No, he'd only been there a short while. He wanted to make sure that he gave this planet their chance. He was going to look over everything, see how people were doing, how everything was going. But if they didn't stop yelling at each other, that very itchy nose might sneeze, and then they'd all be gone. He walked through the store and out another door. Maybe he was in the wrong place. Maybe they were just too busy doing things, and that's why they weren't being very nice to each other. So he got back in the car, pulled out of his parking place, looking very carefully to make sure there wasn't anybody who was going to yell at him. Pulled out, got onto the main street, and started to drive around town. Oh, look, that's a place where people are eating. He could see them sitting outside under umbrellas. Those smells were kind of funny. He didn't know what they were eating. Things on his planet were very, very different. He kept driving. Oh my goodness. A man was outside of his front door, picking up his newspaper and shaking it and yelling at the man at the next house. I bet you told him to drop this in the mud, didn't you? No, I didn't. He just doesn't have a very good arm. Oh, everybody seemed so unhappy with everything. Didn't seem like anybody did anything that made someone feel good. Mr. Mortison's nose was really starting to itch. Well, turn down this road. It looks a little quieter. Maybe the people on this street are doing okay. Oh, wait. Look, down there in that window. I see some kind of lights in that window, he thought to himself. So he pulled over to the side and he parked his car, looked out again. Yeah, I wonder how come that house has all those lights. And there's a house up there with some, and a house down there. Well, guess I'll give it a try. Mr. Mortison opened the door, got out of the car, and walked up to the door. Knock, knock, knock. Door opened up. Hi, mister, what can I do for you? A little boy stood there with a great big smile on his face. That was pleasant, made Mr. Mortison feel a lot better. I was just wondering about your lights. And just as he said that, a lady came out of the kitchen. She had an apron thing wrapped around her waist. Johnny, who's that? Oh, Mom, it's just a nice man. He wants to know about the lights. Well, dear, ask him to come in. Mister, you want to come in? Why, yes, thank you very much. And so Mr. Mortison entered the house, and oh my goodness, it felt warm, friendly inside. And he noticed there were lights in the window, and on the table, there was, what were they? There were candles. That's what they called them here. Candles, little things that had lights on top, candles. The lady with the apron said, well, I hope you're having a nice evening, sir. What can we do for you? Well, said Mr. Mortison, I'm new in town, and I was just wondering about the lights in your window. Could you tell me about those? Oh, of course, she said. Just then, a man came into the room. Who is it, Betty? Oh, a gentleman who's new in town. Well, invite him in. We've got plenty. Would you like to have dinner with us, sir? Dinner? You mean sit down and eat food with you? Well, yes. Oh, yes, said the little boy. Please, come and have dinner with us. We are having the best dinner in the world. We're going to have brisket, and we're going to have potato latkes, and we're going to have applesauce, and it's going to be delicious. Well, I mean, even if you're an alien, you know what delicious means. Well, thank you, said Mr. Mortison. I'd really like to. Thank you very much. Well, come sit down. Sat down at the table, and the lady with the apron passed around the plates that had the best smelling food in the world. My goodness. Excuse me for asking, said Mr. Mortison, but can you tell me more about the lights? I mean, you've got lights in your window, and you have these candles on the table. Why do you have all these lights? Oh, said the mother. You see, it's the holiday season, and our neighbors and our family just love to share the holiday with everybody. And the way we do that is with the candles and the lights that we have. Our candles are named for the holiday. They're called Hanukkah candles. Hanukkah candles, said Mr. Moore. Yes, that's right, she said. You're doing very, very well. Oh, and what about the lights in the window? well, we couldn't very well put the candles in the window because, you know, they're fire and they could cause something to, so we use lights in the window. Our neighbors next door have lights also. They have lights on their Christmas tree, and they're very pretty. And the people down the street, they celebrate Kwanzaa, and they have different kinds of lights. But we all just love to share them because they make us feel so happy, and we think maybe it makes other people feel happy too. Oh, said Mr. Mortison. So you want to share the happy? Yes, that's it. That's a good way of putting it, said the mother. We just want to share the happy. Well, thank you. And thank you for sharing dinner with me. That was just delicious. The truth is, Mr. Mortison didn't even eat that kind of food on his planet, but that was okay. I want to thank you again. This was really just a delight. Thank you so much. Well, said the mother, we're so glad you stopped in. It's always like a present if someone stops at your house and you can offer them a meal. It makes us feel very good. So I hope it makes you feel good too. Oh, yes, absolutely, said Mr. Mortison. Thank you again. He went to the door, said goodbye, walked down and got in his car. Boy, oh boy, am I glad I didn't sneeze too early. That's just wonderful. There are very, very happy people here. I think I've seen enough. I guess it's time for me to go home. I'll tell them. I'm not sure I'll tell them about the potato latkes, but I will tell them what a wonderful place this is. So Mr. Mortison got in the car and drove down to the beach. He parked the car along the road, rolled up his pants, walked down the sand. Just as he put his foot in the water, like that, he was back home. Well, Mr. Mortison, tell us, how did everything go? It went amazing, said Mr. Mortison. I was so pleased. At first, I wasn't sure. Those people who live on Earth, you really have to give them a little time so that you can get used to things there. But I got to tell you, it was wonderful. Oh, so they don't get the big sneeze, is that right? Oh, no sneezing. They're doing just fine. If I don't have anything else to do today, I think I'll be going home then, sir. Oh, yes, Mr. Mortison, that's just fine. And so Mr. Mortison stepped out of the clothes that he was wearing. Now, of course, you couldn't see him now because remember, on his planet, you don't see the people. I think I'll go home and maybe I'll take my daughter out for an ice cream cone. Whatever I do, though, it's going to be better for having been there. I like that. All the candles, all the lights. Let people know we're happy. We're glad they're here. And just like that, Mr. Mortison was gone. Not gone forever. He was gone home. He was going to take his daughter out for ice cream. He figured that would be a good end to a very, very good day. The end.
Lorna, that's beautiful. It's talking about a gift. It's such a gift when you share that story.
Oh, thank you. I love it because the kids particularly are always a little bit aghast at first when I tell them I'm going to tell them a holiday story with an alien. So that kind of grabs them from the beginning, but I do enjoy it, yes.
Well, and I'll say something about
So we just wanted to thank Lorna for reading that for us. We're using an audio file or a video file to make sure that we can share all of that. So we are on a slight delay. So we shared a little extra, but that's okay.
Yeah, and you can actually, I interviewed Lorna Green for the After Sight podcast, which should be dropping maybe tomorrow, I think this week.
Yeah.
Lorna was so generous to allow us to share the video of her sharing this story. And I'm so glad Mr. Mortison didn't sneeze when he was here on Earth. Because
that story was a wild ride.
That would stink.
Yeah, that was an absolutely wild ride. But it was a great story by Lorna. It's so much fun to have her read that, and from memory, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, she has with her vision loss, she has a really hard time reading
yeah.
print anymore. So
Yeah.
it's great that she has that in her memory.
Yeah, and so I guess, do we want to introduce Evan and...
I'll go grab them.
So we've met already most of the staff, most of the people who work and sometimes play in the studios with us. We've had Moses, who read Gift of the Magi. We had Kim Wardlow, who is our executive director, who read our first story. And we have also seen...
Yeah, so we have an incredible team here at AINC, and it really does take a team. It might seem very simple to put something on like this on the listener end or the viewer end, but it really does take a lot of work. And so Evan Starnes, who was the Polar Express inspiration,
Yeah,
we're
Evan
ready to
requested
read that. So here's Evan. And Evan, what's your official job title?
My official job title is the audio production technician.
Audio production technician.
Basically, I'm the guy that kind of oversees everything as far as the broadcasts are concerned and the podcasts. I edit the After Sight program, which was mentioned a couple minutes ago, and just make it sound good and clean. And volunteers are having issues with their audio. If it sounds bad, I will either edit it or I will help them to make their audio sound better. So that's pretty much what I do around here most of the time.
And Evan, you've been listening to AINC for
quite a while.
A long time, since you were
like
a
5
little.
years old.
Since he was 5 years old.
Back when they were the radio reading service of the Rockies.
That's right. So it's and Evan really does. He makes me sound. He makes me sound good.
Yeah, it makes us all sound
He
better.
makes us all sound good. So we really, really appreciate that. And Evan's also super innovative and bringing new technology.
Yeah. Evan's
to
got
the
his
team. So
finger on the pulse of what's going on.
absolutely, and he's the young whippersnapper here.
When did we get so old, Pin?
Yeah. Is Alex gonna pop in?
We'll see here.
Hopefully.
I'll go check.
Yeah, so...
Here's her hat if she wants to.
Okay. Actually, she can just have mine too.
Oh, goody good.
There we go.
um,
We show off our wreath.
yep.
Rosanna helped us do all of our decorating in here.
Yeah.
I'm not quite so festive. We have a live tree that we bring in. I bring in our Norfolk pine before it freezes.
There she is.
Hello.
The lady behind the magic.
Yes,
That's
you
right.
guys sound amazing.
Oh,
You're
thank
doing
you.
Such a good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't have got it this far without your help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a team effort,
Yeah.
and people seem to really be enjoying it. So
Yeah, it's been a lot of
Great.
fun to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. Yeah, and Alex, how long have you worked here?
I've worked here about 4 years, and I started as a volunteer about 6 years ago. So I've been here a pretty long time. It's been an amazing place to work, and
Yeah.
just a really fun job, and it's very everyone here is so passionate, and yeah, it's been amazing. So
Great.
great
Yeah.
coworkers.
Yeah, and Alex really does. I mean, she has a lot on her plate all the time, and she does it with grace, and she's very passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for helping us set this all up. And I think
Yeah.
that's all we've got for our first Christmas Colorado Gives Day live stream.
Live stream. So thanks, everybody. Don't forget to go on and give. It's a great way to really kick off your holiday this year, is helping people like Evan and I have access to the printed word. And we really appreciate everybody who's donated already. Tell your friends, your family.
Yeah,
you know, if
strangers on the street. that's
Strangers
right.
on the street. You can give in honor of somebody else who.
Yeah.
I know when I donated, I did it in honor of my brother who passed away several years
Mm-hmm.
ago. He's still my Superman out there. So yeah, it's a wonderful way to give.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.